Hey guys, welcome to Destiny's Not Dead, episode 3. Today I want to talk about the recent Bungie bounty live stream and a lot of the questions that came up and the answers that were given. My initial reaction to some of the responses we got was a bit on the negative side. And I still feel the way that I felt about them, but I wanted to make sure that my thoughts were clear and that we were clarifying anything possible. Okay. So today's Bungie bounty was not designed to be a reveal of any kind or any sort of in-depth discussion, but they did allow for some live questions regarding the state of the game, where things are going in terms of the sandbox and Crucible and so forth. They addressed a bunch of different things, and I know I'm not going to be able to hit all of them, but I will hit the ones that I remember are most important to me. If there's something you want me to talk about, just let me know in the comments or on Twitter, and we'll get to it. So, with that in mind, one of the things they brought up that, like, one of the first things I saw, or I remember, I should say, because I don't remember the order these questions were in anymore. I've been doing so much reading the last couple hours. Is that the time to kill issue, which is something that I kind of left out of the 1.1.4 discussion because I do feel like that needs some love. I think the baseline TTK, time to kill, needs to come down. And by baseline, what I mean is like this. If you think of your Guardian as having hit points or a life bar in the same way that any other character does, the amount of damage dealt in the Crucible and PvP to deplete that life bar needs to be less, which would in fact make it faster to kill someone, which would lower the average time to kill. So the baseline, the base number, let's say it's a 10 now, I'm hoping for more of an 8. A lot of people talk about like how many seconds or point of seconds or whatever, and that's fine. But I want to try and deal with as wide a range of... I want to talk in layman's terms because a lot of people don't want to get into the nitty gritty, and that's not what this is about. So there are plenty of great discussions on Reddit and other places where they, at the very least, get into the hows and whats and whys and so forth. Although the comments, as usual, were filled with salt. You'll have that, right? So I'm a strong proponent of lowering the time to kill by about, a couple percent for sure. It needs to come down a little bit. I'd be happy with anything hovering around that 8 to 9 percentile. Okay, I don't want a huge decrease, but I do feel that the base needs to go down. Now, so this question came up during the Bungie bounty. So when they said, are you looking to lower the time to kill? And the response was that, and again, I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not going to read from anything for you. There's all that stuff's out there for you if you really want it. But the response was that, as of 1.2, which is coming in May, the exotics are all coming up one way or the other, and they are going to be much more deadly in the Crucible than they have been. And when people start using those more often, that you're going to see an average time to kill decrease, which is fine. From my perspective, that I think that's a good thing. We do need some of that back. My concern is that does not affect the baseline TTK. Okay, that affects an overall average because some weapons are a lot more powerful than others. Okay, that's not what I'm going for, and I don't think it's what a lot of people are looking for either when we talk about the TTK. Right. We want an overall change to the idea of TTK, and then your averages are going to be, coming from what combination of weapons and skills are used to end that Guardian's, turn, so to speak, okay? And the way that the answer was given, it was a very confident answer, which is fine, but in the context of a pretty direct question about overall TTK, to position the exotic bump as being something that was the solution to that problem, I think was a bit knee-jerk and a little misleading. They did, when Deej was reiterating the answer, he did say, well, instead of nerfing something like the Vigilance Wing, we're going to bring the other weapons up to meet it. And it was still within the context of bringing exotics up. They did not mention bringing other weapons in terms of legendaries or anything other than exotics up for the sake of the 1.2 patch. They didn't mention other weapons at all, really. For the purpose of that answer. So it tells me that, balancing other weapons to be somewhat in line, or at least in between where they are now and where the exotics are, does not appear to be something they're talking about directly. Though a later Reddit comment by Cosmo does say, he says, as of 1.2, exotics only are coming up. And the way it was worded was such that it didn't say we're not bringing up other weapons. I think that, like with anything else, they're like, we have to tool all these. The exotics are a priority, and then we'll figure everything else out, because it does create a meta. You got to figure out where everything fits at that point, and I definitely agree with that and some other people that I was having discussions with today. I do feel like that's important. I do feel like you can't just say, well, it's going to work like this. There definitely needs to be some time to do it. I had no expectations, nor would I ever think it was fair to have the expectation that they're bringing all the other weapons up to those standards as of 1.2. My concern is that when you say, hey, what are you doing about TTK? Well, exotic's going to bring the average down. That's not the answer we're looking for. Tell us that will steer things in the direction or give you a glimpse of what we're looking for. But it was kind of sold as this is your solution right here. And it's not. And although I don't think Bungie collectively is thinking that, that's how it came across at the time in the stream. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I wasn't a fan of it. So that kind of ticked me off. But you know what? It's a live show. I've said stuff that didn't quite come off right myself. It happens. I'm not going to cry about it. But until I see definitive, of the phrase that says, hey, Kate, we're looking to bring the overall or base TTK, I want to make that distinction. Saying overall, that's an average. Whereas the baseline, the minimum, how many hit points you have to hit, right? So if it takes 10 hit points to take a Guardian down, okay, right now, okay, and we want it to be an 8 hit point thing later, well, balancing weapons around that is fine, and that's what it should be. Because a shotgun may do, 4 hit points of damage on a headshot at this point. Probably needs to be closer to a 6 or a 7, if not an 8 on a headshot. It should be lethal, in my opinion. But that's a result of the base amount of damage needed to kill that Guardian coming down. When I say we, I'm talking about most of the people that I've seen talking about TTK. And although I'm not always a fan of the arguments being made about that, about how that argument is being levied or what it's being levied for, I do agree with that idea that TTK's got to come down. The time to kill has got to come down. And when I see that argument, typically speaking, and from, for what my money is, I want the baseline amount. I hate to harp on it, but it's just something that's been so hotly debated. I want to be clear on what I mean. So right now, if it's a 10, I feel it should be like an 8. And that then you balance the weapons around how much damage relative to that they are doing to then develop your meta, right? So that's TTK. I'm excited to see where the exotics go. I think it should be a lot of fun. I do feel like it's going to be a painful time in the Crucible when your exotics are that much higher and all these other legendaries are kind of in the wind, so to speak. They are going to force us to kind of build loadouts around those exotics, which I'm not a fan of. I don't like the idea of having to have an exotic equipped to be effective in a meta. I don't like that. But depending upon how the end result goes after some further balancing, I'm probably not going to be too upset about it, ultimately. Okay? Not really. So let's temper that a little bit. The other thing that came up was with regard to random rolls, things of that nature. they said definitively, we are working on that. We've got information to share coming up. They also hinted very heavily at some other community-driven stuff, which is pretty exciting. Like they're talking about community testing. They didn't get specific because Cosmo was like, when Deej was talking about it, but it sounds like they're going to be allowing for some opt-in testing of some sort of patches prior to release to see if they can get feedback. Now, they didn't even go into that much detail. It just sounds like they're certainly wanting to get the community involved and that they definitely want to widen that community involvement on all fronts. They're just figuring out ways to do that. And that sounds like it's coming sooner or later. Sooner rather than later, I should say. So I feel like there's a lot of stuff they just haven't talked about yet that they at all that go way beyond this idea of the balancing patches and content that we're privy to, because we do have, in addition to this balance patch that we know about in 1.2, there's the content itself along with any other features they might be introducing, which we just don't know yet. So I have a feeling May is going to be a really exciting month. I just don't like not knowing, and they know that we don't like not knowing. Communication seems to be a lot more of a priority these days, and not in the, well, we'll tell you when we tell you. It just, to be fair, new stuff's coming. Some of it's got to be a little bit secret, especially if it's a new feature that no one's really been talking about. Bungie seems to be pretty on the ball as far as trying to toe the line a little bit between what they want to keep secret and what they want to talk about. I think it's fair. I would love to get more information. Who wouldn't? But I'm not critical of the amount of communication we're getting. While I think we could always deal with more and more avenues, with the ones we currently have, I feel like we're doing okay. So they also were talking about, this is the big one for me. This is the big grand poobah, which got me really excited. Talking about weapon slot changes. And they said that we have a couple solutions in mind. We're going to be ready to talk about that soon. And what he said point blank was that it's not going to be exactly from D1, and they're not looking to keep what they currently have in D2 either. They're looking to make a hybrid of where D2 started versus where D1 ended up, which I think is the perfect solution. And I've talked about it before if you ever come to the stream. Because as much as I love the original system, I like the flexibility that the new one offers, but I feel like there should be more flexibility and more variety available in terms of weapon options. So with them talking about like the words like throwing that word around like hybrid, that tells me that something really exciting is probably coming down the pike. They were talking about subclasses and making changes there. They talked about why sprint is not affected by 1.1.4. They said they tried it and it broke some other stuff. So they're not doing it until they can figure out a way for it not to break. But they're looking at other ways to do that, or even just increasing other movement speeds. In addition to that, they're looking at a lot of different things. The point I think Bungie was trying to make, and the tone that I was hearing the entire time, despite some of the gripes that I've got, is that, hey, we're not even close to being done yet. There's a lot more we want to do to bring this game to where we think it should be and where you want it to be. We're not resting on our laurels, which is something that in the past, Bungie has kind of seemed to have done. And now I think they're, for lack of a better term, I think they're a bit humbled by a lot of what's going on. And that's good. They need that at this point. They need to kind of change their way of doing things to be more in line with what's expected in today's day and age, and they're taking those steps, and that kind of stuff, it's growing pains. It can be painful. It isn't like a one-stop shop. You can't do it all in one go, just like the balance patches that we're talking about today. There was some talk about why that takes so long and what's the deal with the testing, and I think that's part of why they want to get the community involved with that testing, so that it doesn't feel like as long of a wait for the patch, because there's going to be some involvement. So ultimately, although I was a bit gripey about the exotic answer to the TTK thing, and I feel like that's not a direct answer or the answer I'm looking for at this point, I feel like it does give insight into where we're going. I think the weapon slot answers, that stuff coming sounds really, really good. I feel like random rolls are going to be a thing. It's just a question of what form they take. I think the game's going to be in a really good spot, and I feel like 1.2 is going to have a lot more to offer than we currently think it may. Although it may not be a lot of these, quality of life changes that we're asking for now, there might be some new things coming down the pike we haven't done before that really kind of change things up. Now, as much as I hate to end on a negative, there's one more thing I wanted to point out because this really got me under my skin. When asked why matchmaking is the way that it is and you can't pick your game type, they said that was based around, matchmaking, in order making sure matchmaking was as stable as possible. And, to be fair, the conversations about matchmaking have not been very negative in my experience. And that's because there's a good pool to pull from. But when asked about customizing match types and so forth, being able to go into a control match when you want to go into a control match, the answer for that was the private matches that are coming up in May. It's like, well, that's not what we're asking for here. We want to have an option when we're queuing. It's not the same. It's not. I feel like there needs to be some kind of a compromise. Maybe have 3 playlists instead of 2 or something. Something to where it narrows it down a little bit more. Because I don't really feel like the current system is a fair shake, and I'm not a huge fan of it the way that it exists today. So I felt like that answer was a bit of a cop-out, but they're aware of it. It's something like they said, they're looking into it. I feel like them saying that was meant to say, hey, if it's really bothering you that much, private matches are just a couple weeks away, and you'll be able to do that. But every answer, despite any negative that I had, kept coming back to a relatively positive ending where it's like, hey, that's not definitive. That's not the only thing we're doing. We're looking into this. They're continuing to look into this, but I'm being very cautious as to temper expectations to what's going to get fixed in 1.2. Because I think that they've just got to prioritize stuff, and that some of that stuff's just not as high on the list as I would like. In any case, it was very informative. It helped a ton, and I'm more hopeful about Destiny 2's future than I was before this, because there was a lot of enthusiasm about some of the biggest problems Destiny is facing right now, and I'm just cautiously optimistic that we're going to get where we want to be, because I'm loving the game in the state that it's in now. I want to be in love with it sooner rather than later. But I'll tell you, it's still not dead, and neither am I, and I hope you aren't either. Please catch us at destinysnotdead.com/Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and podcast for any of those various outlets. We'd love to engage with you on Twitter. We'd love to engage with you on Twitch. We'd love to engage with you on one of the live recordings. Check out the website. And if you have an idea, let us know. At Destiny's Not Dead is the best way to get a hold of us. And we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you guys for your time. Love your faces. Cheers.